Michael Long, welcome to the Bookshelf Conversation.
Ron, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So, new book, 42 Today, Jackie Robinson and His Legacy, is a bit different than previous books about him. What do you think? What do you think this book does that other books haven't?
Well, I think what most books about Robinson do is focus on his life in 1947. In fact, I think that's what the wider culture does. We freeze Jackie Robinson on April 15th, 1947, and in the year itself. This is when he's soldiering on nonviolently, turning the other cheek, brushing the dust off his uniform and just moving on, swallowing all the racist insults and jeers and taunts that come his way. And I think we freeze him there, Ron, because he's so safe and non-threatening. And it's good for white America. We think we're doing a good job when we see Robinson like this in 1947. So what the book tries to do is to move beyond that Robinson, to get beyond that, not so much myth, but that stereoscopic focus on Robinson in a really one-dimensional or two-dimensional way. So we try to look at Robinson in a much deeper way than other books do.
You've assembled an all-star team of contributors who've taken on several different aspects of Robinson's life. And looking at the table of contents quickly, you have foundations, baseball, civil rights and politics in the wide world of sports. One of the chapters, which I never would have associated, but every time you have the first of whatever category you choose, there's going to be a comparison with Jackie Robinson. So you have the challenges of a gay Jackie Robinson. Tell us a little bit about that chapter.
Yeah, that's a fascinating chapter by Adam Amell Rogers. And he makes the case there that when we do see an openly gay Major League Baseball player, have we seen one yet, Ron? I'm not sure. I don't think we have.
I just received this book this week. It's called Singled Out, The True Story of Glenn Burke.
Yes.
First openly gay MLB player and inventor of the high five.
Right.
So
Rogers talks about Glenn Burke in his chapter, and it's a really interesting story because Glenn Burke played for the Dodgers, and it seems as if everybody on the team knew that he was gay. He wasn't openly gay to the wider world, but people who knew Burke knew that he was gay. And Walter O'Malley, it said, offered Burke $75,000 to get married. And Burke's response was, you mean to a woman? and he refused to do so.
Just want to make it clear.
He refused to get married. So O'Malley trades him. And he trades him to Billy Martin's team. And apparently Billy Martin introduces Burke by saying, hey, everybody, this is the F-A-G-G-O-T. And Burke doesn't survive too well in Major League Baseball. He ends up leaving and having a tragic end to his life. But Adam Amell Rogers talks about Burke in his chapter, and Rogers makes the case that if somebody were to be openly gay in Major League Baseball today, it wouldn't be the same as Robinson's story, right? Robinson was up against incredible racism and death threats and so forth. And Rogers makes the case that there are apples and oranges now. There's an LGBTQ support system in place for players who would come out. He also makes the case that Robinson set the bar so high, we can't expect an LGBTQ person or player to meet that same bar. So let's take it easy on our LGBTQ athletes, a lot easier than others took Robinson on. So it's a fascinating chapter. I encourage everybody to check that out and to check out that new book by Andrew Marinas, I believe.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw it because it was very short-lived, but there was a series on Fox called Pitch, which is about the first woman major league player. And there are a lot of comparisons to Robinson. She also happened to be an African-American. It developed into like a soap opera, and it ended after, I don't know how many, I don't know if it lasted a full season, but it was the kind of thing you're not allowed to say bad things about because of the topic. Uh, Speaking of things you're not allowed to say bad things about, I'm just getting off topic for a second, but what I'm sure you saw 42. What is your impression of the movie 42?
So I loved 42, to tell you the truth. Some of my historian friends certainly didn't. They saw lots to nitpick at, and it's not historical nonfiction. It's a Hollywood movie. It has glimpses of reality in it, but I found it really inspiring. And one of the things I liked about 42 is that it gives a dimension of Robinson that we don't always see. There's that great scene where Chad Boseman goes into, is it Boseman? Boswick goes into the tunnel between the dugout and the locker room, and he just busts the bat. And it gives us an indication of the fury that Robinson felt in 47. You know, he was not naturally nonviolent. He was not naturally peaceful. This was a guy who had a fiery temper. One of his teammates from Negro League said he had a temper like a rattlesnake. So turning the other cheek did not come naturally to Robinson. And I also like that scene in 42 where Ben Chapman, the manager of the Phillies, is giving Robinson a really hard time, and so are the other players from the Phillies in the dugout. And there's this one indication, and Robinson talks about this in his autobiography, where he says he felt as if the experiment, the great experiment, right, breaking color barrier, was about to fail because when he heard Chapman in the Phillies, he said he felt like throwing down his bat, storming over to the dugout and taking what he calls his despised black fist and pummeling those sons of you-know-whats. He didn't do it. And Jonathan Ogg makes the case in the book that what Robinson did was swallow all that racism and his resentment and turned it into a muscle and performed admirably on the field.
That scene that you're talking about is one of the most, for me, one of the most harrowing scenes in all the movies I've seen. That's one of the more harrowing pardon me, scenes. Let's talk about some of the other chapters, because many of these, if not most, don't really talk about Robinson on the field. They talk about his life after, his role in the Black movement, his role in politics. How do you, as an editor, go about picking and choosing the contributors? Do you say it's write whatever you want to write about? Do you say we're looking for specifically these kind of topics? How does that work as an editor?
Well, I do both. I chose this all-star team, and I think you're right, it is an all-star team, according to topics that they've already written about. So for example, Jonathan Eig wrote a book called Opening Day, and I wanted him to write about opening day, or at least the early part of Robinson's career. And George Vesey used to go to the ballpark and watch Robinson. And I wanted George Vesey, who was a longtime sports writer for the New York Times, to write about his experiences with Robinson and watching the way Robinson transformed Major League Baseball, injected blackness into it. And so I did choose writers according to what they had written about before, but I also chose writers whom I thought would be just awesome writers for the book. And that certainly proved to be true. Sridhar Pappu, who is a great writer, wrote a book on 1968 in baseball, wrote a great chapter about Robinson in 1968 after the assassination of Dr. King. And the list just goes on and on. It was easy to get these writers. Robinson still has that magnetic power, that magnetic attraction. And so when I put out the bait, they bit pretty fast and pretty hard. It was nice. Usually editing a book is like herding cats. In this case, it wasn't at all. I mean, they were super.
Is there something, a topic that you wish had been covered that wasn't?
Yeah, I think I wish I had devoted a bit more time to his family life. I didn't do that. Rachel Robinson has covered that really well in a book called An Intimate Portrait. And Sharon Robinson has done the same thing in her books for Scholastic. Wonderful books, and I encourage all of you to check those out. But that's one topic where I wish we'd done a bit more.
You mentioned Scholastic, and I'm wondering, I'm guessing that more books have been written about Robinson and Babe Ruth than any other player, and then other players combined even. Robinson seems to his history, his story seems to lend itself quite a bit to books written for younger readers.
It does. It's what's really good about this story for younger readers is that it has this terrific plot, right? So he's coming out of awful circumstances, segregated life in Pasadena, California. And then he goes to UCLA and he succeeds, lettering in 4 sports. Unbelievable, right?
And
And then
baseball
beyond
was
that,
the least of his sports, I understand.
he batted .097 in his first season playing baseball for UCLA. But then the story, and then he goes to the Negro Leagues after the military, and then he bursts through the color barrier after having all these difficult experiences. It's a really heroic story. And it has this beautiful ending anyway in 47. And then he ends up in the Hall of Fame. So you got the ready ingredients for a wonderful children's book there. It's about somebody who comes out of difficult circumstances, overcomes them, and then achieves excellence.
A book like this book was published by New York University Press. Uh, there are differences in what a publisher like Simon and Schuster will do than what a university press will do. Do you think that makes a difference in the type of material you present?
Yes, absolutely. For a press like Simon and Schuster, you would want to do something more popular, something that is targeted even more so to a general audience. Uh, but in this case, I wanted to include some academic articles as well. I had some brilliant journalists write for the book. Howard Bryant, for example, and George Vesey, as I mentioned. But I also wanted some academics, including, for example, David Nays, who wrote about the number 42 in a book called 42 Reclaimed. And I wanted people writing out of their own experience as well. So because I had academic perspectives, I went to New York University Press in part, but also because they had a great series about people from New York, and you don't get a whole lot more New York than Jackie Robinson.
That's true. Now you mention it, since Robinson did play in New York University seems like a very likely candidate to publish, as opposed to University of Nebraska Press, which also does
Mhm,
a very large uh,
mhm,
assortment of baseball titles,
mhm.
to their credit. Uh, the
Another great writer in the book, I should have mentioned, an academic writer, is Uhuru Williams, who wrote about Black Power and Jack Robinson. So given those pieces, yeah, that's why I went to the University Press. New York especially, you're right. Robinson is quintessential New York, and New York University Press bid at that proposal within 24 hours. So I was really delighted. That often doesn't happen.
you mentioned David Nays before. Jonathan I wrote his contribution on literally the number 42, how Robinson came to that number. Nays writes about the retirement of the number. My question to him when I speak with him will be, should it be unretired? Given its significance, would it not be? There's one day every year devoted to Jackie Robinson Day where everyone wears his number on their jersey. Uh, in the days when Robinson came on the scene, there were very few, if any, retired numbers. The Yankees have retired probably every single digit they have to this point, which is why they have to go. And in those days, wearing a high number like that is an indication that this isn't a very good player. It's a rookie. He's not long for this baseball world. And now you have players proudly wearing 99, proudly wearing 00.
Mhm.
Uh, so I thought that was interesting that two out of the whole book, 2 chapters are devoted specifically to the number he wore. I found that very interesting. In working with all these different contributors, how difficult is it to literally edit the work they've done? I know in my capacity as an editor for a newspaper, when people give me their articles, had a very light touch. I always felt very uh, respectful. That's not the word I'm looking for. As reluctant to change their hard work. So talk a little bit about the actual editing process.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to change a lot of work as well, especially because this is an all-star team. They're long time writers and reporters. Uh, I did find myself making not only editorial changes here and there, but substantive suggestions about changing the structure of a chapter or changing even some of the content, moving the content around. Uh, and maybe using a different style at certain points. So I did find myself doing that on occasion, but like you, I try to edit with a light hand or in a soft pen. I'm not a big fan of the red pen all over the place. As somebody who writes too, I'm not a big fan of looking at that red pen on my work. So one of the nice things about an edited collection, and they have their problems because essays can be uneven
Mhm.
and quality can differ so dramatically. But
Right.
one of the nice things about them is that you get a really wide range of voices and you can detect all these different voices coming from different places. There's a bit of a cacophony to it. And I like that. I really do like that. Uh, I'm never a big fan of beautiful synthesis and really the purity of a beautifully told story with a perfect ending. I like some dissonance, and you get a dissonance in an edited chapter.
Speaking of dissonance, what is it like bringing a book to the public over the past year? I mean, in previous times, you'd be going out making appearances. Especially with all these different authors spread out all over the country, I'm assuming they'd be pushing the book in their respective locations. It's not that way anymore, or at least it isn't right now.
No, it's a lot easier in terms of doing sessions like this. So I've been delighted by the move to Zoom because it allows for things like this. People just weren't zoomed in before. And so there's a lot more zooming going on. And that has allowed me to reach a lot more different audiences than I would have just by traveling around. At the same time, I miss the interaction with the folks in the audience when I do speak about Robinson. I love when the old timers come up and tell me stories about going to the park and watching Robinson, or stories about how their parents reacted when Robinson broke the color barrier. I just love that kind of interaction. I really do miss that. I miss the interaction with the everyday fans who come to those book talks just wanting to share a story about Jack Robinson.
I know there were two African American behind me, sitting behind me in the theater when I was watching 42, and they were commenting. They were of a certain age, so they remember Jackie in those days. And my mother, who was born and raised in Montreal, told me a story. I don't know if it's true or not, but she didn't know much about baseball, but she did tell me that she did see Jackie Robinson play in Montreal in 46. So
Oh, wow.
I was impressed by that. We've been talking with Michael Long, editor of 42 Today, Jackie Robinson and his legacy. Michael, thank you very much for talking with us today. Stay safe and best of luck with the book.
Thanks so much, Ron. It's great to chat with you.